Hi, I'm back. I am now approximately 7 months pregnant. Took a little break from filming anything because I was in the midst of being a super pregnant person. So I wanted to just give a general update, and then I wanted to talk about one of the things that has come up over the last couple months in particular, which is just unique to being a trans person, I think. Telling people that I'm both pregnant and, surprise, I have a uterus. So first of all, with my pregnancy so far, I've been really lucky. Everything has gone relatively smoothly. I've had a lot of scares. Every time I feel like I get to a sort of checkpoint, a medical checkpoint about like a time period where you're supposed to know about X, Y, or Z, like they do the gestational diabetes check and things like that. Every time I've sort of gotten one of those benchmarks, it can be really stressful. There's a lot of unknowns, and for me, everything is medically very good, but I did not always know that. There were moments where it seemed like I was gonna have a complication and it turned out that I didn't. For example, the other week I had really bad headache for 5 days, and they asked me to check my own blood pressure, and I didn't know how high your blood pressure was supposed to be, and I went to a Rite Aid to get my blood pressure checked, and it said that it was really high, and I thought, I had preeclampsia or something, but the doctor checked my blood pressure and my blood pressure was totally fine. I just had a 5-day headache. So there's things like that that I'm assuming most people deal with in their pregnancy. But what I wanted to talk about today was the things that are unique to my experience of being pregnant as a transmasculine person. So over the last few months, I have really struggled at my workplace. I work in a large office. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people I barely talk to on a daily basis who I do work with, who I'm around, who see me. And I started to just get really mad at everyone for not already knowing that I was pregnant. Like, there was this other woman in my office who is pregnant, and everybody knew that she was pregnant. She's about a month ahead of me. And everybody has known she's been pregnant since she was 3 months pregnant. And she didn't have to make an announcement. She just sort of told a couple people, and those couple people were like, oh, congratulations, and told a couple more people it wasn't a secret, it wasn't weird, there wasn't questions about her body involved, well, I'm sure there was some questions. I'm sure that there were some inappropriate questions that were involved. I think most pregnant people get inappropriate questions. Everybody sort of figured it out, and it was just a known thing. And then for me to be, I think I was maybe getting to be 5 months pregnant, 6 months pregnant, and the only person who knew was really a couple people knew. My two bosses knew, and I just felt like a dirty secret, or that it was something that I was supposed to keep secret for as long as possible. And the fact that other people hadn't figured it out because they see me as somebody who's unable to get pregnant really pissed me off, because I think that they should assume that they don't know anything about my body parts. So I decided to do like a big announcement at my work, and where I could control the narrative. And we had a staff meeting anyways, and so my boss just turned it over to me and let me say what I wanted to say. And I sort of chunked my presentation out into 3 parts. I said, first of all, I'm pregnant, which a bunch of people just started squealing without really having any context about how I was pregnant, which was really funny and sweet. And a lot of other people just stared at me for the preceding 35 minutes with confused looks on their faces because they were unable to hear anything past that point. And I told everybody that I was transgender. I think that maybe 2 or 3 of the 25 people I was speaking to knew that I was transgender already. So it was sort of a double announcement. And I don't think I would have wanted to do that anyways. Like, I didn't want everybody to know that I was transgender at work. I sort of just like having my work be my work, and I'm me at work, and if it comes up, it comes up, but it really doesn't. And so that was difficult to be, I felt almost forced into doing that just because of the circumstances, because I don't want to continue to hide this really exciting thing that's going on for my family and me. So I guess I came out as pregnant and transgender at the same time. The cool part about that was I got to tell them all what they were allowed to do about that. And it was really an empowering experience for me. I got to tell them that it's not weird for trans people to get pregnant, that actually I've known quite a few trans masculine people who've gotten pregnant, that they just don't get to know about it. Or maybe some of them do, but the ones who don't know about it, they just haven't gotten to know about it yet. And that's sort of like, that's on them, and that doesn't mean that this is unusual. I got to tell them that people who have uteruses can use them sometimes. I have a uterus, and so I used mine. Just got to really break it down for them and make it really simple. A lot of people, when they hear that I'm trans and I'm pregnant, their brains do these weird somersaults where they think that I had to have surgery to get pregnant, or that I must not have gotten a hysterectomy, which everyone gets a hysterectomy, and just their brains do these weird things and play tricks on them, and it can actually be pretty straightforward. And that's what I was trying to convey to them, that biology is biology, and that pregnancy for some people has nothing to do with their gender expression, their gender, or their sex. And that was true for me. I also got to tell them that if they had any questions, that they should ask my boss and not me. I have gotten a few weird questions that I would rather not have, but the main one is a question that everybody gets. The main question that I find troubling and that feels like a little miniature knife to my heart is the "what are you having" question. And people ask that no matter who you are. I think it's especially weird to ask a trans person, "what are you having?" First of all, it's not like a complete question. You're probably, hopefully, having a baby. And it sort of implies that your baby is not a baby until it has an assigned sex. When you say, "what are you having?" you could say, "I don't know, it's a mystery. I'm having nothing until I find out what the genitalia is." And then when I explain to people that I'm not interested in finding out what the genitalia is, and that I am having a baby, and that it's a baby, they get confused, or they get really uncomfortable about the question that they just asked. It's the same sort of experience I've had when I was not transmasculine, not identifying as transmasculine, but I looked very butch, and people would get confused about what gender I was, and they would ask me or assume, and they would go, "sir," and I would say, "no, I'm not a sir." That happened to me a lot when I was younger. And then they feel really bad. And then it's about them and like their mistake or confusion or whatever. People do that with this gender sex question. And oftentimes I'll say, I want to avoid it, and I just say, we're not finding out. Because in the back of my head, I say, because we don't know for a while, and that's not really our call. But to them, a lot of people, when I say, we're not finding out, they say, oh, my cousin didn't find out, or like, I didn't find out either. It's like, don't worry, I was just asking that question as form, like, I don't actually really need to know. But that's not even the point. The point isn't that you need to know or don't need to know, and that you're like more like sexist or anti-sexist because you don't care what the assigned sex at birth is. The point is really that gender and sex, in my opinion, are social constructs, both of them. Because when you say female or male, that's a sex, and that means something to people. People associate behaviors to that. Just like they do men and women. Some people say gender is a social construct, but not sex. I say both are. The only thing that is real is a physical manifestation of your genitalia, physical manifestation of your chromosomes. And that can be even misleading because there's so many people who have so many different arrangements of chromosomes, and they express them in a binary fashion, or they express them in a non-binary fashion, but you would never even know. So the point is not that you need to know or you don't need to know and you're like better or worse because of that. It's that you can't know. And I don't want to have thoughts about my unborn child I know my brain, and I'm socialized just the same way as everybody else. I don't want to start thinking things about my child while they're in my body before they're born. I don't want somebody to pull my child out of my body for the first time and have the first thing that they say or think about them to have to do with their sex or gender. Because they didn't have a say yet. And they're getting all these assumptions and associations, generations of them, just like put on them in those moments. And I really want to avoid that as much as possible. It's complicated because simultaneously I don't want to make my child like the only they, them at the park. So that's something that we'll have to deal with as we continue. My family will have to deal with as we continue through this process. But for now, I don't want to set myself up to have preconceived notions about my child before they're born. And everyone asks this question. Maybe 5 people haven't. It is a tick. It's a compulsion in our society to ask this question. So I will never ask this question ever again. Sure, I did at some point in my life, but it will never again be something that I ask out loud to a person because it can be extremely painful depending on that person. So one other thing that I want to talk about is, I get this question less often, but I've definitely got it from a few very brave souls who are really curious about how I could possibly identify as transmasculine and then also want to get pregnant and get pregnant. They see that in and of itself as a total contradiction. And then I've also gotten some questions about how on earth can you from other trans folks, how on earth can you possibly intentionally go off your hormones, which is what is required to get pregnant. So it's sort of the same kind of question, but it framed in a little different way. And I've only gotten this question from other LGBTQ identified folks and T identified folks. And I think it goes to the heart of some assumptions that people have about what a transgender person is. And it's sort of based on the PBS special version of what a transgender person is, where people think, oh, you're transmasculine, you're a man, and you were uncomfortable being a woman. That's definitely a version of somebody who calls themselves transgender. that is not all transgender people's experiences. Vice versa, like a lot of trans people who were assigned female at birth, like identify as non-binary and call themselves transgender, because they no longer associate with the sex that they were assigned with at birth. Some people who are born assigned male at birth and then later in life are trans feminine. Not all of them hated their bodies or felt uncomfortable in their bodies. For me, I sort of ignored my body a little bit, and that was okay. It wasn't awesome. I very much had a strong identity as a woman before I was transmasculine. And it took a lot of sort of facing some hard truths inside myself to recognize I was transmasculine. I didn't want to be transmasculine. I wanted to be, I thought, I'm just this type of woman, and people don't accept it, and so they think I need to be a man. And so there was a lot of that was wound up in my identity, and I needed to really be comfortable saying that's true. Like, some people are like that, but for me, actually, I'm transmasculine. And it wasn't this rejection of my internal organs that maybe some people, sort of like a extreme version that some people think about when they think about gender dysphoria in particular, or being transgender. They think you hated every part of your body that you associated with being feminine or being a woman. And so now you must be changing your gender identity in order to get pregnant. And I just wanted to confirm that, that for me, those things were never associated. I've never felt uncomfortable having a vagina. I've never wanted my uterus out of my body. I've always wanted to get pregnant. That was not, in my mind, essential to womanness. So I think that that's a really hurtful question to get, but I think it's a super important question that I've gotten and been able to answer, because I do think that when we can recognize all these variants and sort of the gender diversity that's out there, especially for people who maybe identify as binary or view themselves as binary, the more that we can sort of challenge that and give nuance to that, hopefully it'll help those folks even find nuance in their own gender identities, even though there's not something so obvious that sort of stands out in our society that makes them transgender, or makes them so gender variant that they label it or have an identity about it. But I think when everybody can recognize the fluidity that they have in their own gender and the nuance that they have in their own gender, the better off we all are, and the more capacity they have for empathy and compassion and understanding. So that was another question that's sort of come up that's been really on my mind. And then I also wanted to talk about just this experience of, in some ways, I've had just an amazing experience being pregnant, and being off testosterone, and I feel very emotional at times in ways that I haven't in a long time, and very connected to my body, and all the experiences of feeling this. Now I called it a fetus until it was viable, and now it feels like a baby for sure. But this baby that's inside my body and is kicking and moving and rolling around, and that has been a total mind-blowing, magical experience, and also like physically exhausting and uncomfortable. But the difference for me is really that what I was touching on in the beginning about people not really knowing or thinking that I'm pregnant, and still maybe looking at my body a little bit. People don't really, if people think that somebody's a man, they tend to look at that person's body less. That's just a fact. People look at women's bodies more and judge them and stare. They objectify them more. But people certainly look at my body and it doesn't click to them that I'm pregnant. And there's just a lot of times where I need them to know, actually, and in order for them to know, I have to do a two-step, which always comes out differently every time, and sort of having to come out over and over again. I mean, I think a lot of people experience this who are non-binary or who are a trans-binary person, but are read as their sex assigned at birth often, where folks have to come out a lot and maybe even daily come out and correct. And I haven't had that experience as a trans person. As I said, I've had that experience as a very butch presenting woman who needed to correct a lot, but having to sort of say, like, I called the dentist and I need to get a dental appointment, but I've had this dentist my whole life, and so they know, the office itself knows that I had a different name before and now I have the name Ari. And the person on the phone, I don't know if I've ever talked to them before, I don't know who they are, and I need them to know that I'm pregnant because I want them to make a note. I don't want anybody to accidentally give me anything that I shouldn't have if I'm pregnant. And I need them to know how far along I am because you can have different things at different times. So I call them and I say, hey, this is Ari. I am making a dental appointment. I'm a trans masculine person and I'm pregnant. So it's like, for people who have that assumption that you would only get pregnant if you were a woman, it's like sort of this double whammy, like, confusing situation. You sort of have to say it a couple times and explain what that means. I'm transmasculine, so I go by he and they, and my name is Ari. And when you see me, to you, I will look like a man. I need you to know that I am also a pregnant man. That my body is in the condition that is pregnancy, and you can't give me medicine that pregnant people can't take. So it sort of takes like a breakdown like that. That's just one example, but you know, this happens a lot. And it can be a little fun to play with people's assumptions and associations, but mostly it's just incredibly exhausting. And I really feel for people who have to do this every day, regardless of whether they're pregnant or not, when they're just navigating the world. So that's really what I wanted to share with you all today and update you about, was these sort of unique situations that I found myself in being a pregnant dude. So thank you for listening.